I've done over 100 backpacking trips, most of them alone. And for the first 20 or so, I had one number in my head: miles. I planned 12, 15-mile days. I walked fast. I took my breaks standing up, and I judged every trip by how much ground I covered. Then one morning at a campsite I'd rolled into after dark and never even looked at, a boulder broke the whole system. A big, dumb, perfect boulder. And I'll get to that. So I tried the opposite. Shorter days, slower pace, on purpose. And it fixed problems I didn't even know were hiking problems. It also cost me something real, and I'll be straight with you about that part too. First, you should know what kind of hiker I was, because there's a decent chance that you do this too. Maybe not on a trail, maybe on vacation, maybe on a Tuesday. I treated every trip like a spreadsheet. Mileage, pace, where I'd eat, what time I'd hit camp, all locked down before I left the house. On trail, I was head down doing the math. A lake wasn't a lake, it was a water refill. 4 minutes, go. A summit was a photo opportunity. 90 seconds, go. I once described a beautiful overlook to a friend as a good place to eat a protein bar, which might have been the saddest sentence I've ever said out loud. And I know why I did it. Miles are countable. Enjoyment isn't. And we tend to optimize whatever we can count. Exercise rings, step counts, calories in, calories out. The number starts as a tool, then quietly it becomes the point. And for me, the number was the point, trip after trip. And it might have stayed that way for all 100 plus of them, except for that boulder. 20 some trips in, I pulled off one of my proudest days schedule-wise. A big mileage push that got me into camp well after dark. Tent pitched by headlamp, dinner eaten in the dark, asleep fast, because the next day was the same song. Up early, big miles, no slack. So I'm up at first light, eating breakfast quick, and that's when I finally see where I am. The campsite I'd used like a parking spot was epic. A beautiful valley, a stream rolling right past my camp, and above it, this huge boulder overlooking the water, perfectly flat on top, openly begging for you to climb up with a cup of coffee while the sun comes up. And two parts of my brain fired at once. One was running the usual numbers. Hey, gotta pack up, gotta move, I've got miles to make. But the other, quieter one was starting to make a list. If I'd gotten in a couple hours before sunset, I would have loved exploring every bend of that stream the afternoon before. If I had one spare hour right now, I'd be on top of that rock with my coffee. I wanted both badly, and I packed up and left. About a mile up the trail, the thought finally landed with this very specific, very stupid clarity. I had just been prevented from doing what I wanted to do on my trip by what I had to do on a backpacking trip. The thing I do for fun, voluntarily. No boss out there, no deadline, nobody assigned me those miles. I did, weeks earlier at my desk. It took me 20 trips to notice a boulder, by the way. And the complete catalog of things I've been embarrassingly slow to figure out is basically this entire channel. So subscribe if you want the rest of it. Anyway, here's why that moment wouldn't leave me alone and why this video isn't really about hiking. That sentence, I want to, but I have to, isn't a hiking thought. It runs everywhere. It's the voice that turns a vacation into a forced march between landmarks, a dinner with friends into the thing that's standing between you and your inbox. I had hauled my own middle manager into the wilderness on my back, and I was still taking his meetings. So I changed it. On purpose, with actual rules for myself, because I knew the had to voice wasn't going to leave quietly. Rule 1 came straight off that boulder. I now build some slack into every single day on trail. I plan each day a couple hours short of what I could actually do, and I don't decide what those extra hours are for until I'm out there. Sometimes they become a slow morning on a rock. sometimes a longer dinner, maybe a side trail, or just sleeping in the morning. The guy at home with the map doesn't get to spend those hours anymore. The guy standing in the woods does. Rule 2, I cut the mileage. My plans went from 12 to 15 mile days down to maybe 8 or 10. And in the winter, when daylight is really short, I'll plan a 5-mile day and feel zero shame about it. On paper, that looks like I'm doing less. But on the ground, it's the difference between commuting through a forest and being in one. Rule 3, my favorite. Any side trail under a mile gets taken. No questions asked. The voice starts up, but that's gonna take 40 minutes, your schedule. But if I have a hunch that something might be interesting, I go. Some detours turn out to be nothing, but a few of them have resulted in some of the most amazing scenes I've ever experienced on trips. And breaks stop needing to be earned. I'll stop for 20 minutes because a creek sounds good. Shoes off, feet in the water like a man with nowhere to be. Which, it turns out, I am. But the change that mattered most, I now get to camp by late afternoon with some daylight to spare, and I can't oversell those extra hours. The tent's up, dinner's unhurried, and then there's this golden stretch where there's just nothing left to do and nowhere to be, and the light just slowly changes around you. I used to schedule that part of the day out of existence, and now it's one of the reasons I go out there. And the part I never saw coming, my trips feel longer. A fast 3-day trip used to kind of evaporate. Home Sunday night and it already sort of feels like a dream. A slow 3-day trip feels more like a week, and months later I can still replay it. That bend in the trail, that campsite, a stream trickling under a sheet of ice. Same 72 hours, I just stopped fast forwarding through them. Now the trade-off, because 100 trips have taught me that there's no such thing as a free upgrade. I cover less ground. Through hiking something like the John Muir Trail, 200 miles of back-to-back big days on a permit clock, that kind of slid off my list. And I've made peace with seeing maybe a third of it slowly instead of all of it fast. Now, I'll still throw down some big mile days if there's a route I really want to do. The miles never became like my enemy, they just stopped being my default. And to be fair, some people love crushing miles. Campsite as a pit stop between 25s. And plenty of hikers that I respect live exactly that way. I'm not like recruiting anyone. I just found out that the race is optional, and sometimes we don't always realize that. So here's how far this went. A while back, I redid a route in the Yosemite backcountry, one from my racing era, when every campsite was a pit stop. This time, I did something that old me would have considered clinically insane. I stayed at the same campsite for 2 nights, on purpose. One entire day of that trip had 0 miles in it. 0. And what did I do with a full day in the wilderness? Nothing, by every metric I used to track. I tended a fire. I laid in the hammock. I watched the light move across the same patch of trees for hours. No summit, no peaks, no pace. And it was the best day of the trip. Maybe on the short list of the best days I've ever had out there. My old spreadsheet would have scored that a 0. And the 0 was the best part. And you don't need a backpack for any of this, by the way. A 0-mile day works just as well on a Saturday. Oh, and since I know someone's going to ask, no, I never made it back to that boulder. I still owe it a sunrise cup of coffee. People hear I hike fewer miles now and assume that I lowered the bar, but it's the opposite. Hiking fast never added anything to my trips. It subtracted from them quietly for years and taught me to call the leftovers an accomplishment. The miles were never the trip. They were just the part that was easy to count. And that was the second number I had to quit, by the way. The first was my pack weight. I spent years obsessing over every gram before that broke too, and I made a whole video about it. If today's video hit, then that one's the prequel, and it's right there. So slow down out there, take a dumb little side trail, and I'll see you on the trail.